Good morning, everybody. How we all doing out there? I finally did it. I finally found a brilliant coffee shop within walking distance from my place with plenty of room to sit down and write. And it isn't Starbucks, which I was very over in New Hampshire, to be honest. And then last night, at the recommendation of my friend Andrew, I began watching Presumed Innocent with Jake Gyllenhaal. Amazing. I absolutely love it. I know I'm late to the party. The whole season's been out for a little bit now. But if you do enjoy crime dramas, thrillers, and you haven't seen it yet, I highly encourage you to give it a shot. All right, watch this transition. Quote, frustrated at the unavailability of any women to date, he punched her in the throat. That is the subject of our story today. This is the French serial killer, Ghost of Kehl. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from a CBS News article, Murderpedia, Wikipedia, WTTW News, and the rest I will list down below for you. Maybe my memory is off today, but I swear I've never heard of this somewhat recent serial killer, and I'm hoping it's new to you as well. The town of Kehl is a charming little German village on the Rhine River, directly across the border from the French city of Strasbourg. The city's backdrop is a breathtaking one. The Black Forest. The Black Forest is an elegant range of mountains and valleys that almost reminds me of the Appalachian Mountains. That is, until I read this. Quote, the Black Forest, or Schwarzwald in German, is home to the Cuckoo Clock, the Grimm Brothers fairy tales, and world-renowned thermal spas. And the name comes from the 100-mile stretch of pine trees so dense that the sun struggles to reach the forest floor, end quote. Just a little side note, this area had the world's largest cuckoo clock or cuckoo? I think it's cuckoo clock until bumfuck Sugar Creek, Ohio beat the record, with it standing 23 by 24 feet. Apparently there's a Swiss-themed town in Ohio that is all about this stuff, and they go very hard. What are we talking about? The little village of Kehl. On October 11th, 1999, around 4 a.m., a 22-year-old Turkish nurse named Hadis Selik was finishing up her nightly rounds at a peaceful retirement home. She turned the corner outside into an open courtyard, barely lit by the distant moon, when all of a sudden she was knocked unconscious from behind. The attacker dragged her away from the courtyard, stabbed her, and slit her throat. He then pulled her pants down, but did not sexually assault her. Before investigators could even formulate a proper theory, another woman was attacked, both in the town of Kehl. Quote, on November 23rd at 4 a.m., 38-year-old Barbel Zowel was attacked just as she was leaving her house to go to work. The man hit her from behind, but Barbel managed to call for help, at which point her husband intervened and caused the assailant to flee. As a result of these two recent cases, the Kehl police decided to conduct patrols to prevent further incidents, end quote. Whether or not the police were connecting these attacks yet, it did stand out to me that the suspect is keen on the early morning hours and, of course, unsuspecting women. At least this time, they got a partial description of the man. And as for those extra patrols, they didn't help. 2 weeks later, on December 4th, around 3 a.m. again, 66-year-old Gisela Dahlman, a retiree who was distributing newspapers on some back roads, I assume her shift had just begun, when she stumbled into a strange man. According to Wikipedia, he approached her from behind, but Dahlman was alerted to his presence, forcing him to press his hand against her mouth. After the woman bit him, the enraged man hit her and dragged her off to an isolated corner where he severed her carotid artery. Again, he pulled down her pants, but didn't assault her and didn't leave any DNA behind. After this third attack and a second murder, police upped their efforts once more, patrolling the city top to bottom, night and day to try and catch the killer, now dubbed by the media as the Ghost of Kehl. Months later, and without an ounce of progress, the man attacked again, this time at night. On May 15th of the year 2000, 44-year-old Ursula Brylowski, a German professor at the Robert Schumann University, crossed paths with a man while riding her bike through the forest on the French side of the border, so just across the river. Around 9 p.m. that evening, a man stopped her and attempted to woo her, but failed. Now here we go. Quote, frustrated at the unavailability of any woman to date, he punched her in the throat and dragged her off into the forest, where he stabbed Brylowski a dozen times or so in the torso, arms, and legs before finally cutting her throat. Her body was found 20 hours later, end quote. Up until now, every attack had occurred in or around Kehl on the German side of the Rhine River. This was the first time it happened on French territory, albeit only mere miles away. The German police had even contacted French authorities without success, hoping to see if they had any similar cases prior to this incident. However, they heard nothing, and they would have to wait another year until they got a break in the case. On January 19th, 2001 now, a man was arrested for assaulting a passing motorist with a katana. Like a big-ass sword. And when the police asked him why, he said, quote, I had a score to settle. His name was Jacques Plumain, and he was imprisoned for this bizarre crime, of course. And while behind bars, people started to murmur, claiming that he was responsible for more crimes, and maybe most notably that he looked like a suspect in the Ghost of Kehl attacks. The more they investigated, the more it made sense that he could be responsible for those crimes. Plus, since his arrest, no other women had been beaten or killed. 5 months later, as suspicions mounted and still no more similar attacks, investigators interrogated Plumain in regards to the Ghost of Kehl murders and attacks. To their surprise, he readily confessed to 3 crimes. Quote, regarding the Ursula Brylowski murder, he beat her into unconsciousness before dragging her off into the woods and killing her there. As with previous victims, he lowered her underwear to make it appear as if she had been raped, although he hadn't. He additionally claimed that he never intended to kill Barbel Zobel, but he instinctively attacked her because she caught him stealing bike tires. End quote. He also admitted to killing Gisela, but claimed that he had nothing to do with Hadis, the Turkish nurse from the beginning of the story. Now, all of this information came rushing in so quickly that it made the immediate katana case exponentially more complicated. Prosecutors needed time to sort everything out and agreed on a first trial date in September of 2003. In the meantime, they had to learn everything about Jacques Plumain. According to Wikipedia, Plumain was born on August 14th of 1973 in Guadeloupe, an overseas department administered by France. The 4 of 6 children, all half-siblings fathered by different men, with Plumain's own father, a Jehovah's Witness, refusing to take part in raising them. As a mediocre student during his youth, he was physically abused on a regular basis by his overbearing mother, whom he claimed beat him with a variety of appliances, such as her belt, telephone cords, an electric cable, and a broomstick. Later on, he would also claim that he was sexually assaulted by a cousin at the age of 13. In 1989, the 16-year-old left Guadeloupe and moved to the French mainland, where he settled in Strasbourg, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, in early 1990 and finished an apprentice as a cook. When he came of age, he joined the army, and his job was disarming landmines in various regions, which I thought was actually pretty dope. But as the end of the 1990s approached, Plumain was dishonorably discharged from the army after getting caught stealing credit cards. Here's where it gets interesting. Jacques Ploumain had been a murder suspect once before. In May 1999, the police in Plobsheim were notified of the murder of a 23-year-old sex worker. I forgot to fix the quote. Whose body was found in a garage. As he was a soldier stationed near the area at the time, Ploumain was proposed as a suspect. I put all those words together, but was not arrested due to a lack of evidence. Quote, on July 25th, the body of 30-year-old Sylvia H. was discovered in the backyard of a building in Strasbourg. At the time, nothing connected this murder to Ploumain, who up until then had no criminal record and no concrete evidence indicating he was a viable suspect. However, 3 days later, no less, on the 28th of July, he stabbed and seriously injured another young woman at the exit of a nightclub, for which he would be arrested. While he categorically denied responsibility somehow, Ploumain was nonetheless convicted and sentenced to a year in prison, but appealed the decision to the criminal court. He succeeded in obtaining it due to lack of evidence connecting him to the crime and was released on October 7th of that year. End quote. Excuse me? First of all, so he was convicted of stabbing a woman but then just got off on it, even though she survived and probably pointed him out in the court of law. But he's also been getting away with this for much longer than anyone could have anticipated, although he still only remains a suspect in those crimes. And that news makes this next part much more frustrating. In September of 2003, during his first trial, Jacques Ploumain was found guilty of attempted murder for the katana incident and sentenced to 12 years. All right, good. Then in May of 2005, his murder trial began. He was noted as being, quote, cold and detached during the majority of the proceedings, and in his statements, he claimed that, quote, a person named Maeve was the one who had killed all those women, not him. However, a psych eval also concluded him to be a pathological liar, though. And on June 3rd, 2005, quote, Jacques Ploumain was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, for which he was given a life term with a 30-year security sentence. And as he was acquitted of Hatis Selik's murder, the prosecution demanded a new trial. They wanted to get him on all of those murders. 3 murders and 1 attempted. So on March 27th of 2006, the appeal trial began in Colmar, where again, he was found guilty. But this time, his security sentence was reduced to 20 years. That was a big oops. And in March of 2008, the charges in Sylvia's murder were dismissed entirely due to lack of evidence, end quote. So after it's all said and done, he got 12 years for the katana, and then a life term with 20-year security sentence instead of 30 years originally. And only 15 years after the appeal, Jacques Ploumain is released. 15 years for 2 murders and most likely more. He got 12 for the katana attempted murder, and then essentially 3 years for 2 additional and 1 attempted murders. It hurts. He got out in January of 2021, just a couple years ago, claiming he's a reformed man. And I hope he is reformed for the sake of everyone, himself, his family. But I believe his reformed ass should just stay in prison. I've said it before and I'll say it again, weed dealers serving longer sentences. Ugh. It should be 15 for the attempted murder alone. I looked everywhere, even Facebook, and for the life of me could not find what he's up to now, currently, or where he's disappeared to. I just hope they don't regret letting him out. And that, my friends, is the story of French assumed serial killer Jacques Ploumain. I just know they could have legally done more. I don't know. But I hope you all enjoyed today's awful story. It's beyond me that Mr. Throat Punch is roaming the streets today. But thank you all for listening, and it's truly awesome to see people enjoying this. I appreciate it. And if you'd like, stick around for a bonus true crime story after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Finally, some decent news, y'all. I know last week I said I had a refreshing story, but pretty sure I missed the mark on that. So this is titled, quote, Jury Awards $50 million to Man Wrongfully Convicted of 2008 Murder, written by Heather Sharon of WTTW.com. Quote, a federal jury ordered the city of Chicago to pay $50 million to a man who was wrongfully convicted in a 2008 murder case and spent 10 years in prison, setting a new city record for a wrongful conviction case. Marcel Brown was 18 when he was arrested in connection with the August 30th, 2008 murder of 19-year-old Paris Jackson in a Munson Park. Brown was convicted in 2011 of first-degree murder after driving his cousin, 15-year-old Renard Branch Jr., to the west side of the park. Convicted in 2011, Brown, who is now 34, was released in 2018 and granted a certificate of innocence in 2019. Quote, justice was finally served for me and my family today, Brown told reporters after the jury verdict. We're just thankful being able to be here today. Thank you, jurors. Brown is represented by Levy and Levy, a law firm that specializes in police misconduct litigation and advertises itself by telling potential clients that, quote, no law firm in Chicago has been more successful in litigating police brutality and police misconduct cases, end quote. A spokesperson for the city's Department of Law said officials are, quote, reviewing the verdict and assessing its legal options, end quote. Before the case went to trial, city lawyers attempted and failed to settle this lawsuit. If the verdict is upheld, it would be equivalent to more than 60% of the city's annual $82 million budget to cover the cost of police. I haven't read this part yet. I missed this little snippet. Oh my God. If the verdict is upheld, it would be equivalent to more than 60% of the city's annual $82 million budget to cover the cost of police misconduct lawsuits. Holy shit. How is that even a budget? I'm glad they're getting paid, but that's a lot of friggin' misconduct lawsuits. It would also be significantly more costly than nearly any other lawsuit brought by a Chicagoan who was wrongfully convicted based on evidence developed by Chicago police, spotlighting the risk the city faces by taking police misconduct cases to trial. By comparison, and this is kind of sad, the most recent wrongful conviction lawsuit settled by the Chicago City Council called for Ricardo Rodriguez to get $5.5 million after spending more than 22 years in prison after being wrongfully convicted of a 1995 murder. Until now, the most expensive wrongful conviction verdict came in 2021 when a jury ordered the city to pay $22 million to Mr. Fields, who was convicted of a 1984 double murder and sentenced to death before being exonerated. The verdict was upheld on appeal. How can you appeal a man who you, as the city, killed? That's crazy. In all, between January of 2019 and June of 2024, Chicago taxpayers spent a total of $200 million to resolve lawsuits brought by more than 36 people who were wrongfully convicted based on evidence gathered by the Chicago PD. Marcel Brown was convicted after Chicago police detectives testified Brown told them he knew that his cousin Branch had a gun and planned to shoot someone who was causing his sister trouble. This all happened during a 5-hour video-recorded interrogation, and in all, Brown was held in an interrogation room for 34 hours before being charged. Subsequently, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison, but Brown's conviction was overturned after Karen Daniel, director of the Center on Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University's Pritzker School of Law, that's a mouthful, and attorney Greg Swigert convinced the judge that, quote, Brown falsely implicated himself in the shooting after the lengthy interrogation wore him down to the point that he just said what the detectives wanted to hear. During his interrogation, police refused 7 requests from Brown to speak to his mother. Brown told police 40 times he said he did not know that Branch had a gun when he agreed to give him a ride to the park, and he asked to go home more than a dozen times. Detectives repeatedly accused Brown of lying and said that he was facing between 35 and 45 years in prison if he did not tell them, quote, the truth. Brown then implicated himself after the video showed him, quote, curled up in a ball in the corner of a room, crying. 3 hours after police began interrogating Brown, an attorney hired by Brown's mother to represent her son arrived at the police station and asked to speak with his client. Police refused to allow him access to his client and never informed Brown that his attorney wanted to speak with him. Under a 1994 Illinois Supreme Court decision, statements made after an attorney has requested to speak with their client but is denied cannot be used as evidence. And then in 2015, the only witness who said he saw Brown and Branch in the park at the time of the shooting said he lied during Brown's trial after police threatened to take away his children and suggested that he could also be charged with murder, end quote. Amazing that this is coming to fruition now, but the fact that had to happen for us to get here, and how many more are there? How many more coerced confessions and lies have been twisted together to simply decimate the lives of innocent people? But again, I am so happy for Marcel Brown and his family, and I can only hope that this sends a message. Well, we have again reached the end of another episode. I truly appreciate each and every one of you sticking around to the very end. It means the world. Have an exquisite weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you. Love you.